Hello, welcome to the Snap UK, and this is a special episode as we can bring you a conversation we've just had with the host of the Nat Coombs Show, Nat Coombs. Listen in as we discuss the crazy season we're having so far, being a UK-based NFL fan, and a burning topic for at least one member of the Snap UK team. After the upcoming tag, give it a listen, and we'll be back with you after the conversation. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Nat Coombs, host of the Nat Coombs Show on ESPN. Yep, I know, wildly original title. Hey, well, each week I get together some of the leading voices from the NFL UK family and plenty of our stateside friends too to get you up to speed on the 2020 season as we roll all the way to Tampa Bay and hopefully another Gronk beach party. So wherever you grab your pods, download and subscribe.
Nat, welcome to the Snap UK.
Good to be here.
Thanks for coming along. So, for those you don't know, Nat is host of the Nat Coombs Show on ESPN, as well as Sunday night. You cover the NFL on TalkSport 2, which I was listening to last night. It was really good. How are you enjoying the season so far? It's
Absolutely
been a bit mad.
It is just good to have football back, isn't it? Given that ridiculous year that we've all had. I remember being in the first week of the season in studio, and the show I do on TalkSport is a whirlwind because it's kind of like a bit like Red Zone on the radio, right? We're just going across all the games, and it is quite a freight train. But just about an hour and a half in, I think I just said to the fellas, it is just so good to be doing this again. So I'm delighted that we have football. I am worried that we might not have football for the whole season. That seems like a very real possibility. But the NFL is there is a smart collection of business people running that operation. So hopefully they'll find a way through. But yeah, it's good to have it back.
Yeah, I mean, we've had the sort of the COVID not outbreaks, but occurrences at Titans and Pats. I mean, do you see it being a elongated season?
Yeah, I think it has to be. I mean, I think they're already, and I think the NFL knows it as well. They're already running out of opportunities in terms of rejigging and bye weeks getting used up and everything else. So I think the NFL is more than prepared for a season to extend beyond the 17 weeks of regular season, to extend beyond that to the postseason too, and the Super Bowl, conceivably late February, March, right? And I think that's fine. That's fine. We can live with that. The obvious problem that the NFL has is, unlike the NBA, the bubble just isn't possible, or a bubble mechanic isn't possible until the playoffs at the very least. And unlike Major League Baseball, who had a similar issue, you can't play double headers. Much as we'd love to see some double headers, it's not going to happen, right? So yeah, I think it's the only option they're going to have if there are more outbreaks.
Do you think there's a bit of there's going to be a longer lasting effect within the NFL now? I guess from my point of view, you were seeing quite a lot of like long-term injuries. Some of them are freak, but I kind of think some of them down to the lack of preseason, the lack of kind of preparation, that thing. Do you think that this kind of experience is going to change some of those conversations about preseason between the NFL and the NFLPA?
I think it's a great question. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think the season will affect ongoing seasons in a number of ways. I think from a broadcast perspective, I think we're going to see more and more, we're already seeing more and more windows being used by the NFL. And I think that is absolutely something that they will look to continue, because commercially it makes sense. And much as we love the game, it is all about the dollars and cents, right? For those running it. Let's be under no illusions about that. So I think that's a big part of it. And it's a great point you make about the injuries that have been sustained so far. It absolutely has to have, a lot to do with what we've seen in the offseason. But I guess on a more positive note, one of the things that's really surprised me has been how quickly rookies have acclimatized to the league. And I think there are a few reasons for that. I think that the league is evolving and changing and making it more viable for rookies, particularly offensively, to adjust to the NFL quickly because of the developments in terms of offensive strategy and leaning more towards some of the things we have seen in college for a long time. So I think that kind of makes sense. But nevertheless, it has been, I think, startling, and hopefully that's not too overstating it, to see how quickly rookies have just rolled straight into it. And it's interesting to understand why. I mean, there are two schools of thought on this. I was talking to Jay Bell about this during the off season, saying how big a problem is it going to be, and he said, well, definitely for defensive players and particularly for corners, right? It's a huge issue. However much film or X's and O's you're shown, it's a huge issue not to be walking through it and going through your paces and being on the field. But the flip side of that, so he thought it was going to be a massive issue. The flip side of that is Menelik Watson came on our show at the start of the season and said, because rookies haven't had that quite dramatic introduction to the NFL in camp, where they're suddenly not the biggest stars in town and they're, I'm in the NFL, and that can dent confidence even subconsciously, because they haven't had that, because everything's been done virtually and they've all been kind of eased into it. Actually, they've come into the season with a bit more swag, or it just feels like football. And I think Edwards-Helaire said that, didn't he, after the first game of the season? He said, after a few butterflies in my stomach, I was playing football. So it's a great point you make, and I think there are lots of different things we can look at, and they will look at when this season is done and dusted, as to what might change going forward.
Quick one now around teams that have moved on from head coaches. So obviously, not many fans in a lot of stadiums, but also quite a lot of turmoil in the league. Is it the right time to make a change, or should you just hold firm this season and try and go with what you know? Because we're starting to see some varying results, but there's definitely some coaches under pressure, such as a certain Mr. Gase.
Yeah. I mean, God, he just seems to be forever under pressure. And I think a lot of it is self-inflicted. It's a really interesting point. I can't believe how so many team owners refuse to accept that the demonstrably most important thing in football, in most sports, I'd argue, is continuity, is staying the course, is building something, building an identity. And it isn't just coaching, or in the case of a kind of hybrid figure like Bill O'Brien, there's a huge amount of responsibility on the shoulders in terms of being the architect of the personnel as well. But it's the same principle, right? So, and I think, let's take an example to your question of Arthur Blank pulling the trigger on Quinn and Dimitrov going. Like, I think he gave them enough. He did. He kind of backed them as much as he could, and it was okay. Like, I can't, we're done now. We've got to move on. But I think in so many other instances that isn't the case. I think, for example, someone like Matt Patricia, who has been slagged off to the hilt, just back him for a bit. Detroit particularly, just back and give him another couple of years. Unless you've got this unbelievable option on the table. And it's a bit like rookie quarterbacks, right? Every now and then, an Andrew Luck or a Trevor Lawrence comes along, but everyone else, it's a bit of a crapshoot, right? You're not quite sure. And it's the same with head coaches. Like, you don't know if it's going to be much better. So I to your point, I think just stick to your guns a bit, and definitely in this season, which is so on its head and erratic. Like, what are you going to do? Like, you're not going to get. You hear team owners say, "Well, it means that we're ahead of the pack if we're making the decisions now." It's really, I mean, come on. I don't think that should be a reason, unless there is. I mean, Gase is a good example. I mean, I think I just don't see any way back for him, right? I just don't think there can be. But in most other cases, I would always err on just give him another go.
And there's two sides of it, isn't there? There's one where, from an organizational point of view, there are franchises you can look at and go, they just keep making those changes. It doesn't work. They need to kind of figure out. And I kind of put like the Browns and the Jets, one of the Lions in that kind of camp. And there's another side of it, like pretty solid franchises who kind of, like you say, the Falcons kind of give time to coaches. Dimitrov had 12 years there, opportunity. So it always amazes me that, not just kind of at GM level, owners just can't see the writing on the wall. You look at all the successful franchises, like Steelers,
Ravens.
Patriots, Ravens. It's continuity. And even the Ravens, when Ozzie Newsome went, they had like this whole handover period between the two new GMs. Yeah. So it just amazes me that they can't see the wood for the trees.
It's a great point. You can apply that to football as well, I think. Look at the teams that, by and large, have enduring success in football, European level, as in European competitions or domestically. It is teams that have continuity, that, to your point, if they are making a change, there is a clear succession plan of values and of direction and approach. And not just coaching, but personnel as well, and talent acquisition. And the ones that are just chucking money at the problem, you know, the NFL obviously just kind of free agency, ridiculously overpaying for players that are just cashing in, and which has been Miami for most of the time I've supported them. No surprise. Guess what? It hasn't worked, you know, and the ones that are quietly accumulating massive draft capital have this. We had on that we had Rob Ninkovich on our show a couple of weeks ago, right? And Nink, I said, look, just talk about what it's like to be under Belichick, and this season in particular with this defense. Come on, is he really going to be able to craft anything? You know, look how many vets he's lost. I mean, it's not just the players that left in free agency or in the offseason, but to COVID as well. Like, you know, when Chung said, I'm not Hightower, like there's no way. And he said that the difference, and Ninkovich played obviously a long time at the Pats, but he played at the Saints and one other team, I can't remember. And he said that but the difference with all of those other teams that he played for in the Patriots is that Belichick will look at what he's got and work around that. Whereas other teams he played at, they said, this is what we have and you've got to fit in. You got to fit into this, right? And you look at what I'm trying to understand how Belichick continues to find undrafted free agents, you know, 6th round picks and makes them work. It's because he's got such a clear vision of what he wants to do, but at the same time can adapt. And there's just what I'm getting at is there's such a clear philosophy in that organization that you would assume, even if you haven't got the coaching smarts of Belichick to the same level, replacing him, that philosophy will continue long after he's gone.
Yeah. One of the things that I find really interesting, that, especially in the UK, is that all kind of, because it's still quite a new sport, all the kind of NFL UK fans, they all have a kind of a history, a story as to how they got into the NFL. What's your kind of background from that point of view?
So I am a child of the 80s. So I was one of that generation that turned it on back in the day on Channel 4 and thought, what is this amazing Technicolor thing that I'm watching, and fell in love with it ever since. So I mean, absolutely sold from day one. I always had an obsession with America as a young kid. I think that had something to do with it. And a lot of people I chat to who love the game, Brits who love the game, that seems to be a common thread. For a long time, we had a show called Americanage, which some of your listeners might remember, which was all American sports, but also pop culture. And that seemed to really emphasize that point, that a lot of fans of that show liked it as much when we were talking about The Sopranos or Scorsese, or I don't know why I'm using gangster references here. We talk about other things beyond gangsters, but politics. I mean, just in travel and just places we've been to and what we liked and the Americana of it. And so I think I was sucked into that for sure. But yeah, I was a kid of the 80s. It fell into it. Subscribed to First Down, as I often remind Carlson, subscribed to First Down as a kid, reading Carlson in First Down just to wind him up. And the Miami Dolphins are my team for the very clear-cut reason that I watched Marino and the Marx Brothers and saw this freewheeling offense. Had a sense, I think, quite early on that they weren't one of the best teams, or at least the serious contenders, but they'd be there or thereabouts, and they could beat any team on their day, and I like that about them. So yeah, I'm a Miami fan for no other reason than I like Marino and like the style of football that they played.
Well, you're talking to two Giants fans and two 49ers, so we are all children of NFL Blitz on 4 and
and
Madden.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I love early era Madden, early era Amiga and ST Madden.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
I mean, on the Sega Master System, which
I remember it. I remember that. That's a great game. You know what's nuts about this? So on that tip, when we're doing the London games, which latterly I've been doing for the B, but you know, back in the day, obviously for Channel 4, but the same production mechanic, you know roughly who you're going to have in the studio outside of the fixed guest. So you got Jay Balosi, you know, Carlson as the fixed guest, but you'll be told, okay, so you usually get one of the or two of the veterans that have come over with the team. So you know you're going to get them, and you're told one or two other faces are going to come up. We don't know who they are yet, and it can be everything from had Harry Connick Jr., Michael Johnson, Commissioner Goodell. It's like different names. And you're told, like, Commissioner Goodell's about to come in, and you're looking through. And the way that it's structured, you've got obviously all the seats and the game behind you through the glass, right? And then obviously on this side is where all the cameras are, and there are lots of bright lights and cameras, but you can look just beyond the cameras into essentially a room that connects the studios together, right? Which is shared. It's often shared with Sky. So there was a kind of slight Anchorman moment when we're sharing it with Sky. But both productions use that room for guests coming in to do makeup and everything else, right? So in my ear, I suddenly hear, Nat, you've got another guest coming in now. And it was perfect synchronicity. As they were telling me, I looked through and saw, and they said, it's Mick Luckhurst. And I could see through the thing, and Mick Luckhurst was there getting made up. But amazingly white teeth, of course, great tan, and look through, and Mick Luckhurst. So for listeners of a younger age, or listeners of a younger age have no idea who I'm talking about. Luckhurst was when I was a kid, and I'm guessing you guys as well, was the guy on Channel 4 that presented it, was a kicker for the Falcons, and he was the guy that fronted it. And this was full circle. I was doing this game for Channel 4. I'd come all this way from, a kid reading First Down in the playground to doing and anchoring the game. And there Mick Luckhurst was about to come on. And for all the people that I've had the opportunity to interview in that situation, Mick Luckhurst might be one among my favorites for that reason. And he didn't disappoint either. He was great. He was a really good guy.
That's awesome. I guess for us, like, I think at the moment, because we've lost NFL on a Tuesday on the BBC, which of course, you've hosted, and it's like, what do you see the target audience for, like NFL UK? Because you've got the Sunday show, you've got Saturday, but like, I think there's sort of a fan base in the UK who sort of feel like they're possibly not being catered to unless they have Sky, which is a considerable cost. So, and I just wondered how you see it for the sort of NFL UK hardcore fan, how they're being catered to by the sort of free to air TV.
Yeah, I think it's a very important point that you're making, and I think that the NFL UK guys, who I know most of very well, of course, having worked with them over the years, and they're a great crew, right? They're a great crew. So I would say this to their face, and I have actually to Alistair in the past. I know him pretty well, Alistair Kirkwood, and I know him well, and I've had this conversation with him over lunch, that you've got to make sure that you dance with the one that brung you. I think, as the great Leo McGarry once said, you've got to make sure that you don't forget those fans that have been there for a long time, from the beginning, even if they haven't been there a long time, but they are hardcore and devoted and passionate to the sport, but can't afford Sky, can't afford Game Pass. And I can tell you that Alistair knows that and is behind that. He gets it. But sometimes things aren't always as clear cut as they seem. In other words, why hasn't there been free-to-air terrestrial live games for a long time? Obviously, Channel 5 have brought them back this year with Monday Night Football, but it isn't always as clear-cut. And, for example, when we were at Channel 4, we had a 3-year deal, and it looked incredibly likely that there was going to be another 3-year deal, to the point where I remember having a conversation in July of that year, like going into the next season, ahead of the next season, with Vernon Kay, who was part of, he was presenting we were presenting the highlight show together, and was obviously part of our team on the station. We were talking about it, saying, yeah, it's all good. Like, so in other words, his agent, my agent, everybody involved with it, yeah, it's all happening, right? And then at the 11th hour, the deal falls through. Now, it wouldn't be politics to explain why. Suffice to say that it was a situation that was difficult for NFL UK, because they're now thinking, right, well, what can we do here? So I think sometimes it's easy to criticize the NFL UK guys when it isn't always as clear cut as it might seem. Having said all that, I totally buy into the importance of having free to air live games. Having done what I think I did 3 years on 5 and about the same on 4, the amount of fans that discovered the game because of that late night show, not to be underestimated. And you can have all the influencers and hype and all of that side trying to earn new fans. But actually a really good way of finding new fans is just putting the game on and putting a half decent broadcast around it and letting people discover it and make their own minds up. So yeah, but it's good to see it back on 5, huh? And hopefully that'll be the start of more of it.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed the Monday night games, and of course, but yeah, no, it's I do miss my Tuesday night OC and J Bell.
I'm covering for Chappers on doing my QB2 special this week and covering for Chappers on Thursday. So I'm catching up with OC and J Bell. So I'll try and find the inside skinny for you and come back and give you an exclusive as to why the Tuesday show's been cut. It is a shame because it was great to see. Well, look, the more coverage, the better.
Of course.
I suppose in the other part of your question was how are we catering for the hardcore fan base or the literate fan base or the fans, right? Full stop, who don't necessarily have any kind of subscription access. I still think there's a fair amount out there, and without being too kind of self-promotional, shows like my SPM on or the radio show we do, shows like yours, right? And all the other pods out there that are together, that are literate, that are, that's a great development. And it doesn't replace having access to games and reaction analysis and everything else. Of course it doesn't. But that is something that over the last 5 years, if I would have thought that TalkSport would be dedicating a Sunday night show, or TalkSport 2 to be precise, but the TalkSport network, a Sunday night show to NFL 5 years ago, they just wouldn't have done, irrespective of whether we got live games or not. And so I think there is some progression happening on that side, but yeah, it's a tricky one. And hopefully Sunday Night Football will come back in some way on free to air terrestrial. That'd be good.
Cool. Well, while we're talking NFL UK, of course, it should have been the London game this weekend.
Yeah.
Was it the Packers we were due? We were due the Packers this year, weren't we? Yeah, like what are your thoughts on the prospect of a UK or a London franchise coming eventually? It's sort of muted every so often, and but yeah, do you see this coming soon or at all even?
What do you guys think? Would you like to see a London team?
Well, I've been out to games in the States, and it is a very different atmosphere watching teams with, a fan base, a proper fan base, out there than it is at Wembley or Twickenham or wherever you go in the UK. Whether I see it ever happening again, I'm not really too sure how that fits into the current makeup, because obviously you're going to have to, enhance the league by a certain number of teams to be able to do that. So you're potentially looking at Germany and Mexico and the UK, etc. So I think to get the owners to buy into that and share the revenues a little bit more, I don't see happening. I think, it is a transatlantic sport, and I think the fact they bring us 4 games a year, me personally, I think we have to be a little bit grateful to that.
Yeah. It's something I never thought I'd see, when you're watching, if you're going back to Blitz and thinking, eventually we got like the London Monarchs and the Rhine Fire, right. And, going back to those days, to have 4 weekends where, and I think that'll be the difference. If it comes across as a team, I think I kind of like the fact that it's a 4-week almost celebration of NFL, where, no one, there's a sort of a partisan nature to some of the crowd, but everyone else, you stood next to a load of Eagles fans or, Bills, and, there's no, I think it would change the dynamic we've got. And at the moment, I kind of like how it is. I kind of enjoy 4 weeks as well, and it is, as well. It's only 4 weeks rather than the sort of 8 that would be committing to as a full team.
I think the atmosphere you get at games, you don't really. I don't feel like you get that any other atmosphere. Everyone's just walking around, and you can literally play spot the jersey, and you will probably easily find all 32 jerseys plus a whole kind of plethora of old replica jerseys as well. I'd be in 2 minds about, if, say, a team relocated, and let's use the Jaguars as an example. I couldn't see myself supporting the Jaguars as a 49ers supporter for the last 20 or so years. So I think that kind of dynamic is also hard as well. So I agree. I kind of like it how it is. Maybe increase the number of games so we get more teams coming over would be awesome. But from a logistical point of view as well, I struggle to see how that would work effectively. How you get kind of teams coming over from the West Coast on a consistent basis, and how all the logistics around time zones and bye weeks and all that would work. I can't see it happening. I could see us getting more games and that kind of increase of teams coming over on a yearly basis, but a fixed franchise, I think, might.
It's the British nature as well, isn't it, that puts us off? Because the British nature, you guys were a game away from being world champions last year. You said nothing positive about the 49ers most of this year. If we ended up, let's say the Jags were the example, the British nature in me would hate them from day one, and I don't know why.
Hate them.
But just like the natural British pessimism would get to me.
I know exactly what you mean. So my sister, I'm a West Ham fan, as is my sister, and she is. And West Ham fans are a pessimistic bunch by nature. She is amongst the most pessimistic. Where we are at a game, and within the first 25 to 30 seconds, she'll lean over and say, "We're going to lose." We've just kicked off. I mean, it's a good point you make. Some great points. I agree. I think the franchise mechanic is complicated, right? And the NFL might just look at it and think, well, let's just increase the games. If we had a franchise here, we'd have 8 games. It's the great shout about, well, what do you do with the team you support? I know people say, well, that happens a lot in America. I've got mates who've moved from New York to LA, for example, and or irrespective of where they've moved, actually, they will move from a place where their team is to another team, and they will go and see them regularly and have an affinity with that team. But it's not the same. It can't be the same, and I think that's a huge problem for the NFL here. If there is a London team that already exists, or if it's an expansion franchise, which I think is unlikely. So yeah, more games in London, I think, is looking increasingly more likely than a franchise.
I'll ask this question from our comrade.
I need to ask this question first. It has to take precedence. We had a massive row last week, and I want your input.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
If you're in charge at Canton, does Philip Rivers go in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, boy. That is a great question. He's absolutely borderline, right? Which is presumably why this is such a contentious issue. But I mean, he's right. Okay, Eli definitely goes into Canton, right? 100%. And I'm not saying this for the Giants fans in the room, but it's not even close. Okay. Yes, of course, there are a significant number of quarterbacks throughout his career that were more talented, more capable, put up better numbers, yada, yada, yada. Not just that he's got 2 rings, but it's how he performed, not just in the Super Bowls, but in the playoff runs to those Super Bowls. He's a clutch player. It's not even close, Eli. That one drives me mad. So he's clear-cut. Rivers, right on the line. I like Rivers a lot. I think even this season, talk of his demise is overstated. That, look, he can't throw a deep ball, but I don't think that necessarily matters. And obviously it matters to a degree, but I don't think it matters to the point of we've got to bench him for Brissett. If you look at his mid-level passing, yesterday even, right? We're recording this on Monday. So yesterday, it was, I can't remember the exact stat, but amongst the top 4 quarterbacks of passes of 10 yards or over, that mid-level stuff is still fine. I know he throws an ugly ball, but he hasn't jumped the shark. And I think he has put it up over the years. Up until the last 18 months, everyone said about Philip Rivers, he's the best quarterback never to win a Super Bowl, right? And the length of career that he's had and what he's achieved in a mixed bunch of Chargers teams, individually, he's got to be close. But right on the wire, I am fascinated to know which side of who is on which side here. So who is Rivers in the Hall of Fame?
Well, myself and Griff, who can't be
deadly silence.
It's because you know how anti this I am.
Yeah. So I've been.
They had to mute me last week because I was basically shouting at them.
Yeah. I think there's probably one stalwart who isn't with us today who has been, a big protector of Philip Rivers. I have been probably for a number of years on his case because he's taken some very good teams and not delivered with them. When you see other quarterbacks, rise to the occasion, even like Kaepernick took a, reasonably average 49ers team to the Super Bowl. You can say whatever else you want about him, but Philip Rivers never did that, with a lot more talent, certainly on the defensive side of the ball around him.
Yeah.
And Paul also shares my common disappointment, I think.
Usually,
Rivers...
and you brought up a good point, because whenever anybody says about Rivers, the first point is always Eli. Eli has won the Super Bowl twice. He was Super Bowl MVP twice. He took a wild card team to the Super Bowl. No one's ever done that. Philip Rivers was the Week 17, 2017 AFC Offensive Player of the Week.
No one ever mentions Ben Roethlisberger. He also got 2 rings, but he didn't play that well in the Super Bowl. Like his Super Bowl, he was like this.
The first one, particularly as well. Yeah, I mean,
he's taken a team there 3 times.
I think it's on both sides of the argument. It's the taking the team, right? Because in the same way that it's not all on Philip Rivers that the contending Chargers teams didn't make the Super Bowl. At the same time, you can point to the performances of Eli, and Roethlisberger is a great example, and say, well, okay, don't get carried away with the ring, with the trophy. What did he do in that game? And look, it's very clear that a quarterback is the most influential position in the NFL, in any team sport in the world, you could argue, right? So a lot is on that individual's shoulders and can change a game. But the suggestion that Rivers hasn't won a Super Bowl and that's all on him is I think pushing it a bit too far. At the same time, I would contend, and well, as I said, the reason why Eli is for me a lock for the Hall of Fame is because of his individual performances in those 2 Super Bowl runs, and specifically the postseason runs. I mean, it's not even close. Rivers right on the fence. I guess a lot will be determined in the next 2 years, right? I mean, if he puts up, another 2 winning seasons, gets the Colts to the playoffs both time, and look, then it becomes a bit of a crapshoot with this Colts team. Look, I know no one's taking them seriously as a Super Bowl contender now, but case in point, let's look at the Giants midway through the 2007 season. I mean, they've got a good enough defense, just like both those Giants D's were, right, with Spags and of course 2-time Super Bowl winning Osi Umenyiora, and I mean, I don't think the Colts defense is as good as either of those 2 Ds, but it's a capable D. They're a balanced side. Crazier things have happened. Nobody saw the Titans coming, let alone rolling into the AFC Championship. So I think if Rivers puts up a couple of big seasons, playoff seasons, racks up another 10,000 yards and whatever it is, touchdowns, he'll probably tip him over, but right on the line.
Right, one more question from Griff. Myself and Griff, we're very fond of, when we were playing football, the contact element of football, and that kind of fondness kind of extends into the NFL. We love seeing like the massive hits, people getting drilled to the ground. It's part of the entertainment of the game. Do you think, kind of like with all the latest legislation around kind of kickoff returns and the head-to-head helmet, that the NFL is becoming a bit softer and we're kind of losing that physicalness to the
Definitely.
game?
And I'm really torn about it, because not as torn as I am about Philip Rivers for Kaepernick. I'm torn about it because logically it makes sense. The more we understand about brain injuries, certainly, and we understand how to protect players more and rather move on from casting a blind eye, which of course was what was going on realistically for many years, not just brain injuries either, but just generally this mindset of back in there, which I still think clearly exists to a degree. One of the things that is underestimated, I think, about the NFL is most players are injured most of the time, right? And hey, talking of Philip Rivers, one of his finest moments was playing on a torn ACL, for God's sake. I mean, that was unbelievable. So no doubt that side of the game, I think, will continue to be prominent, by which I mean you just tough it out, you keep on going and everything else. So that side of it, I don't think is going to be affected by what we're understanding and learning. But what we do understand and what we are continuing to develop in our understanding about brain injury in particular, we have to protect the players. We have to. It would be totally negligent if we knew all this and we learned all this and we didn't do anything about it. However, I think at times it goes too far, and I sympathize a lot with defensive players. The officiating is obviously tough. It's easy to criticize, like any profession, there are good practitioners and bad practitioners. But it does wind me up how context is removed a lot of the time from a situation. So you'll see a defensive player who's quite clearly no intent whatsoever. And you can apply what's wrong with applying that individual assessment on a case-by-case basis. But we do that in so many walks of life. Why can't, why is it just this is the draconian black and white rule? So that drives me mad. And defensive players I sympathize with massively because they have to adjust how they've always learned how to play the game. And they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. So protect players, good thing. The level at which defensive players are being punished, not so good.
I think we have an issue with the on the defensive pass interference, the penalty of it occurring at the point of the foul just seems completely bizarre.
I think for years I've been very frustrated that you can get a 40-yard penalty for someone who hasn't actually completed that football in action yet. But yet you can take someone's head off and cause serious injury for a 15-yard penalty.
15 yards, absolutely.
I just can't get my head around it. And I think some of the best coaches, whether it's Sean Payton or Bill Belichick, they play that rule so strongly. It just really changes games. And so then we should protect players, but then we should also have rules that don't make a mockery of the game as well.
Yeah, exactly. When you see, a heaving up a 50-yard jump ball because you've got the receiver that can contest for that, and the corner is making, and you could argue, well, he's making the mistake. He's not looking at the ball. He's but there's incidental contact at best, and that is flagged, and it changes the game. Oh, come on, that's where common sense needs to be applied. I think defensive pass interference has to be flagrant to be flagged in my mind. I mean, I think if it's incidental, just let them play. I mean, because it's not, as you quite rightly say, it's a great point. It's not dangerous, or most of the time, it's not dangerous. It's just jockeying, incidental. If it's flagrant, if he's got his arms wrapped around, if he's taking them, fair enough. But if it's just he kind of knocked into him because he wasn't looking, and ruins the game.
There you go. We agree. So but yeah, thanks for joining us, Nat. We know you're very busy, so we'll let you go. But of course, an open invitation if you ever want to come back on.
Pleasure. I'd love to. I want to come back on and carry on that Philip Rivers chat. I would like come back on and we
you
never
haven't even
resolve.
got started on Frank Gore yet. Don't you?
Oh my God! What am I opening?
He's a lock. He's a lock, isn't he, for the Hall of Fame? Clearly.
You know what? I will bring a player every time I come back on. I'll make this promise here and now. I'll bring a player, a contentious, borderline Hall of Fame player. Just throw it out like a grenade, and we'll just discuss that for 45 minutes. Next time I'm on.
We'll mute Paul before then. That's fine.
It's fair. Makes sense.
But no, thanks for joining us. And of course, you have the Nat Coombs Show on your podcast network, on any wherever you listen to podcasts, and the show on TalkSport 2 on a Sunday evening. But Nat, thank you very much for coming along.
Pleasure, fellas. Really, really enjoyed it, and hope to see you soon.
Cheers very much.
Cheers, guys. All the best. Yeah. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed that. We certainly did. And of course, Nat is very welcome to come back and join us to continue the discussion about Philip Rivers and Frank Gore into the Hall of Fame any week. Of course, and any other details about life being an NFL fan in the UK. We're back tomorrow and every Tuesday to discuss all the weekend's action. So until then, we'll see you soon. Thank you. Goodbye.